Welcome, it is Mitch. I'm on YouTube. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel as we try to build this thing up. OTAs off and running for the Green Bay Packers. A lot of different topics, avenues, things we can dive into. I wanted to zone in on a couple of players today, really one in Lukas Van Ness, and how the Packers are approaching OTAs with LVN and things they're kind of tinkering with, things they're kind of flirting with, trying out with Lukas Van Ness, and how I think it's the right path to go down with him. And it's something we've seen with Jordan Morgan last year, and this year he'll be competing for the starting gig at left tackle with Rasheed Walker. Let's start with LVN, though. Entering his third year, I would say, I'm trying to think, out of all the players on the Packers roster entering this year, Lukas Van Ness is in that top tier for me, at least, and let me know what you guys and gals think. Lukas Van Ness is in that top tier for me of players who, like, it feels like a make or break season for him, like, for his career. And I'm not saying if he underwhelms and is inconsistent again this year that he's going to be out of the league come 2026. But after being the number 13 overall pick in 2023 and really having two, I would say, wildly underwhelming years, it's a big, pivotal, critical, crucial season for LVN in terms of his career. And Green Bay and OTAs so far this offseason, they're going about it in a way where they are going to leave no stone unturned. And I think that's the route to take. Multiple reporters who were at OTAs for Green Bay earlier in the week noted that the Packers had LVN at times lined up on the interior of the defensive line. And keep in mind, Lukas Van Ness at Iowa, his first year, primarily played on the inside of the defensive line before kicking it out the following year as a true edge rusher. Green Bay took him with the number 13 overall pick in 2023 as an edge rusher, and the results so far, they haven't been great. You're not seeing the flash plays. You're not seeing consistency. I know LVN, talking with reporters again earlier this week, noted a thumb injury that he thought really held him back last year. And I have the quote, or I have a couple quotes. There it is. All right. This is Lukas Van Ness talking to reporters, I guess depending on when you're watching this, but Lukas Van Ness talking to reporters on Tuesday, so I'm recording and posting this on Thursday. Lukas Van Ness said, and I quote, "Last year I had a broken thumb all of OTAs. I wore a full cast all the way until about week 10 or 11. Not exactly sure. I had lingering issues after, so I wore it most of the season, which is kind of why I was limited to playing on just the right side of the defensive line. So I'm excited to get back, kind of have the ability to go play on both sides again," end quote. And look, only Lukas Van Ness really knows how much that thumb injury really held him back. And it sounds like it played a role, it factored in. You can't ignore it, right? But what we also can't ignore is in 2 years, for a guy who was taken number 13 overall, if you're talking about the proof being in the pudding, it hasn't been there for Lukas Van Ness. Now, Goody has raved about LVN all off season whenever the topic has been brought up. I believe at one point or a couple of different points, whether it was the combine, the owners' meetings, the end of the year presser, all the way back in January, Goody has said how he's expecting a significant jump from Lukas Van Ness this year. And again, it goes back to what I say. You bundle all these guys on the roster, and when it gets chopped down to 53 and who we expect to be there, obviously there are some clear-cut locks to be on that 53, and then it gets a little dicey maybe when you get to 50, 51, 52, and then that last spot. LVN's going to be there, and I think when you include all the guys who we know will be on the roster this year, it's a pivotal year for Lukas Van Ness. I haven't given up hope after 2 years, but there's certainly been a lot left to be desired. And Green Bay opting to shuffle him in during OTAs on the interior of the defensive line, to me, is a good thing. I don't look at it as a situation where Green Bay's like panicking and they're like, oh my gosh, we're worried about LVN. Let's try him inside, maybe tag team him next to Kenny Clark or Devontae Wyatt instead of at edge rusher. I look at it as Green Bay saying, we used a premium pick on this dude 2 years ago. We expect him to shine and flourish in 2025 as an edge rusher. But if that doesn't work out, can we try to filter him in elsewhere? Can we, and I don't expect a full-on position change, but even situationally, maybe you can have LVN line up in different spots across that defensive front. And Matt LaFleur was asked about it by reporters after OTAs earlier in the week when they had noted that LVN lined up on the inside for some reps. And LaFleur said, and I quote, "I think situationally you can do that. I think in known passing situations, there's some thought around it. A lot of it's going to be dependent on everybody else as well. Lukas has shown a lot of growth. I'm excited to see him once we get pads on and really all those guys with how they compete," end quote. Green Bay used, as I said, a premium pick on Lukas Van Ness, number 13 overall in 2023. If for some reason it wouldn't work out at edge rusher again this year, you have to exhaust every possible avenue and option that could be a solution with Lukas Van Ness before you even consider just cutting ties on the idea of him being a crucial part of your defense for the years to come. I mentioned the name Jordan Morgan. He's another guy who you take in the first round out of Arizona a year ago, and he played tackle primarily at Arizona. Yet as a rookie, the playing time that Jordan Morgan saw before suffering a couple of injuries, and one being the season-ending variety, we saw Jordan Morgan get shuffled in at right guard and sort of spell Sean Ryan at times. Now, earlier this offseason, the Packers have already announced that Morgan will be competing for the starting left tackle spot with Rasheed Walker. And I don't know if I want to open up that can of worms completely, but I will say this. I'm a fan of Jordan Morgan. I hope he works out. I hope he ends up being a premier offensive lineman, whether that's at guard, left tackle for the Green Bay Packers. I will note that Rasheed Walker, to me, has played pretty damn well in the last 2 years after being a 7th-round pick for Green Bay. And I do wonder, and I have my own thoughts on this that I'll share. If Jordan Morgan was a 4th or 5th round pick, 6th round pick, if he wasn't a 1st or 2nd round pick, let's just do that. If Jordan Morgan wasn't a 1st or 2nd round pick last year, do you believe the Packers would be pushing this issue of, hey, open competition at left tackle between Rasheed Walker and Jordan Morgan? Because when I look at this, I don't think there's competition for the starting left tackle spot because of Rasheed Walker's performance in 2024. I thought he was fine. I thought he was pretty good, right? Was he top tier? Was he all-pro caliber? No, but Rasheed Walker was more than just a fill-in. He was more than just serviceable at left tackle. He was pretty good. But when you use a first-round pick on someone who played tackle primarily in college, you're going to try in every which way to force that issue at some point, and in this case it's with Jordan Morgan, to see if he can be a starting tackle and a good one for you at the next level. And so to me, I look at the situation with the competition that's going to take place between Walker and Morgan, and I look at it and I say it has nothing to do with how Rasheed Walker performed in 2024, but it's more used a first-round pick on Jordan Morgan, see if he can be your left tackle, see if he can win the competition against Rasheed Walker. But if he doesn't, it's not a complete failure, and then you can try him out elsewhere. Right guard, maybe. And keep in mind, Sean Ryan and Rasheed Walker are both entering contract years, so is Zach Tom, but I'd still be pretty shocked if nothing got worked out with Zach Tom on an extension front. So you have a couple of these guys, Jordan Morgan, Lukas Van Ness, and you use first-round picks on them. And versatility is the name of the game in Green Bay. Like, is there... I know we can live in these silos with our teams, and for the Packers, like when you follow them every step of the way, you're more knowledgeable about what's going on with Green Bay than what's going on, in Carolina, or what's going on in Atlanta or Baltimore, so on and so forth. But I am curious, like, is there another team that values versatility, especially on the offensive and defensive line? Like, is there a team that values it as much as Green Bay? Because you look at all these draft picks that come in. Zach Tom at Wake Forest, he's playing tackle for Green Bay, but he can play guard, played center at Wake Forest. Jordan Morgan, tackle at Arizona, is slotted in at right guard as a rookie. Elton Jenkins, tackle, guard, center, doesn't matter. Belton out of North Carolina State, 2nd-round pick this year. Tackle for the Wolfpack, could potentially take over for Sean Ryan next year, maybe this year if there's a competition there at right guard. And then you flip it to the defensive side, and you see them Flirting, I think, is the descriptor I use. They're flirting with the idea of, hey, situationally, known passing downs. Can we put Lukas Van Ness inside? Does that unlock anything for LVN? And again, it goes back to you used a first-round pick on these guys. It hasn't been a great first 2 years for LVN. He notes the thumb injury as a big reason for really why maybe he wasn't as impactful last year. I don't want to use that as a crutch to dismiss the entire season for LVN because it was underwhelming. And he's going to get more opportunity this year. And, pretty similar to the Jordan Morgan situation. And this isn't meant to cut down LVN. But if Lukas Van Ness was let's say Lukas Van Ness, Green Bay took Kingsley Enagbare, what was it, 4th or 5th round? Somewhere around there, 4th, 5th round. And this year they took, Baron Sorrell, 4th, 5th round. And Rashawn Gary was a former first-round pick. But I do wonder with LVN and, Brenton Cox Jr. last year, wasn't he a UDFA? And I thought he performed pretty damn well after the Preston Smith trade when his number was called and he got an opportunity to really step in on that defensive front. I wonder with LVN, if he wasn't a first-round pick, is he assured to be a starter this year? Like, I have my questions about that. Again, a lot of it is circumstance, and a lot of it is the nature of the beast, the business that is the NFL. If Lukas Van Ness was a 4th or 5th rounder like Kingsley Enagbare, who's been with the Packers for a few years and has had similar, if not better, production statistically than Lukas Van Ness. If Lukas Van Ness was a middle-of-the-draft pick, is he just being handed this starting gig on the opposite end of Rashawn Gary? Those are going to be your two starting edge guys based on what he's done the first 2 years. And my point is I don't think there's a lot of substance there with LVN with what he's done the first 2 years to warrant just giving him the starting edge spot outside of he's a first-round pick. The first 2 years haven't been what maybe we expected, and it's going to be a big year for him in year 3 or a big opportunity, and we're going to give him ample opportunity to show us what he's got. I talked about it with the offensive line too. That's kind of what I think is going on with Rasheed Walker and Jordan Morgan. Jordan Morgan might end up being an incredible left tackle for the Green Bay Packers, but nothing in Rasheed Walker's performance as the starting left tackle last year warranted there being a competition outside of Green Bay used a first-round pick on Jordan Morgan to play tackle at Arizona, and they need to see if he can get it done at the NFL because you used a high draft pick on him. So it's a interesting spot for Green Bay for these players. Again, I think there's a lot of whether or not he feels it, who knows. There's a lot of pressure on LVN this year. He's going to be the starter, opposite side of Rashawn Gary. He's going to be getting a heavy dose of those snap count totals. And based on the first 2 years, if you are hesitant or pessimistic about LVN entering year 3, I get it. And kind of in a spot where it's just like keep your fingers crossed that it all does come together, that he can avoid, injuries anywhere. He mentioned the thumb last year. And I think Rashawn Gary vouched for him about how important it is, obviously, as a pass rusher to have your hands at full go and to not have that if you're Lukas Van Ness. Yeah, it certainly affects your play. So Green Bay, I like the method. I saw a couple people on Twitter who were like, oh, they must be worried that LVN just isn't going to cut it at edge rusher, and now we're trying him at the inside of the defensive line. I don't look at it that way. I look at it as, Green Bay trying out different things. It's OTAs. You have the luxury of doing that when it's organized team activities in the beginning of June. But I do think, maybe if there's a seed planted in the back of their mind, it's just making sure that because he was a first-round pick and the first 2 years haven't been great, that you try out everything. You lay it out, you empty the clip and options and things that you can try for a guy like Lukas Van Ness. And hopefully it does just work on the edge and he becomes a premier edge rusher for Green Bay. I have no problem with what they're doing so far this offseason with him by experimenting on the interior of the defensive line. doing it with Jordan Morgan. And I know Van Ness, I'm trying to find this other quote. Here it is. He had mentioned, this is his third year, and this is the first OTAs where he's really felt settled in, because first year it was rookie. You already feel a little overwhelmed transitioning from the college level to the NFL. And last year he said he had the broken thumb and he was already wearing the cast during OTAs. Van Ness said, and I quote, "This is my first time to kind of get this slow tempo foundation period, just to kind of work on the basics. I've really learned a lot over the last couple of weeks." So we'll see. Got to back it up on the field now. Goody has raved about him all offseason. Matt LaFleur has talked about his preparation and how confident Van Ness has looked. That was a word he used, confident, when talking about LVN earlier this week. We'll see. But I like Green Bay kind of doing that no stone unturned approach with these higher draft picks, because if it doesn't work out for LVN on the edge, try it somewhere else, like on the interior of the line. If it doesn't work out at left tackle for Jordan Morgan, try it at right guard. That's what you experimented with last year at Sean Ryan when he would come in for certain series for the UCLA product. So we'll see. It's a fascinating start to the offseason. I like this approach for Green Bay. Let me know what you guys think. And perhaps a lot of these guys too. I'll end with this. You went through a big overhaul in scheme going from Joe Barry to Jeff Hafley. And that takes time. It does. Whether or not you want to admit it, whether or not you think I'm using it as an excuse, that's not the intent. That's not the purpose. Year 2 for these guys being in Jeff Hafley's system, what does that look like for Lukas Van Ness? What does that look like for Rashawn Gary? What does that look like for Quay Walker, Devontae Wyatt? A lot of these guys who were big parts of the defense in past years, Kenny Clark too. There's other names out there, Keyshawn Nixon, Jair if he's back. But these guys who were in Joe Barry's system for a few years and then he's out of the frame and Jeff Hafley gets hired, do these guys have a sense of comfortability, understanding, entering year 2 of Hafley's system, just a better grasp on it that can, just push them forward and help take some of these guys to another level who, Kenny Clark mentioned a foot injury. He had surgery in January that was suffered all the way back in week 1. If you look at Kenny Clark's year last season in a nutshell, it was like, that wasn't up to the standards we've seen from Kenny Clark. Foot injury obviously played into it. Maybe second year in Hafley's system for a lot of these guys, Clark included, LVN included, will help them take their game to another level because there's just more comfortability in knowing what the expectation is and knowing what the call is going to be in certain situations, scenarios, things of that nature. But no doubt, again, I'd have to really think about it because I was thinking about it off the top of my head. All the players in this roster, LVN is certainly in the top tier. I'm not saying he's number 1, but if you want to pool together guys in tier 1, 2, 3, 4, you talk about a make it or break it type year for their career. Lukas Van Ness on this team, on this roster, is in that top tier. It is going to be a massive year for him individually to really show Green Bay what he's got. Let me know what you guys think. It is Mitch M on YouTube. Always appreciative of all the support. We'll see you next time.